Hi, welcome to part 2. In this video, we'll build upon the AI-generated first draft of the deck. Specifically, we'll go over how to make various kinds of manual edits on Alai, and how a building blocks called elements work. Let's get started. For our first example, we'll focus on how to replace the logo in the layout with a near nest logo. The first thing to note is that all controls for ending on a slide are always available on the sidebar. When nothing is selected, we see the slide level controls that we'll get to later. When we select the image, we see all the controls that apply on the image. So here we want to first remove this logo, which we can do by clicking X out here. And then we can upload a logo. So let's do that. So if we see that our logo is now uploaded, there are a bunch of things that we could do here, like change the size. We could also change the size of the logo by dragging it here. And we could increase its size. So those are some ways to interact with images, and we'll cover this in a lot more detail soon. Now let's look at editing text. Let's say we want to change this line. We can just click here and start typing. So let's focus on a value prop that appeals more to employers, as we're going to be selling this as a subscription service to employers. Cool. We can also select part of text and highlight it. So let's just use the highlight color here. Now, before we make more edits, let's understand the structure of the slide. The slide is made up of various building blocks that we call elements. So on this slide, this is an image element, as we saw. This is a text box, and similarly, these two are text boxes as well. And this is another image element. Let's look at a few more elements on some other slides. So on this slide, we see that this is an element that requires sections. Each section's element within it has one or more sections. So for example, in this case, there are 3 sections. When we click on an element, we see the controls corresponding to it. So here, if we add more sections, this will add another section to the slide. We can also control its layout by choosing a different layout here. So for example, here, this will make it go in a row. Here, this will put 2 things in the first row, and here they're stacked as a column. Now let's try to think about what can we do here to reduce the slide height. This slide is going over the default slide height, which has a default 16:9 ratio and is indicated by this dashed line. One thing that we can do here is to make these sections take less space. One good way to do this is to use compact, which makes the sections much smaller. But perhaps this made it way too small. So let's undo that change. Maybe we can just choose a slightly smaller heading size, and we can always find these settings on sections. So instead of using an H1 heading, we can use an H2 heading. Cool, that works, and now a slide is within slide height. Another thing on Alai is that the elements are responsive. So when we look at the slide, if I want to increase the width of the sections element here, I can just resize this, and this will make sections wider and the image narrower. Similarly, I can just drag and drop to reposition or reorient my layout. So for example, here, I could take up this image and put it here, and then everything else moves accordingly. Or I could put this image next to my title, which would also work. So adding new elements or reordering them is super easy. Let's say we wanted to add another text box below this. We could just click on add an element and then just drag our text box and then put it here. And then we'll be able to add more content here if you wanted to. Let's work with one final example to edit a slide to make it look better. So for example, here you see that there's a lot of empty space at the bottom, and these things side by side, they look a little bit too tight. So I'm going to move this text box here, and then now my slide is a little bit taller. To make the sections take less space, instead of putting these two sections in a column, I'm going to put them in a row, which I can do by changing the layout. Finally, I can put the imaging up by clicking here. And now my slide looks a lot nicer. So those are a few ways to make edits on Alai manually. Let's look at more in the next video.